Hi there, legal writers. Welcome to this Legal Grammar Redux video series with me, Jill Barton from the University of Miami School of Law. In this video series, I am covering 12 grammar topics, which are covered in more depth in chapters 19 through 21 in the Handbook for the New Legal Writer. And those topics are listed here. They include 8 grammar basics and then 4 more advanced grammar principles. And today we are talking about the second advanced grammar principle, and that is parallelism. The rule with parallelism is that you need to have parallel construction in your writing. And so here are 3 tips to help us figure out a way to always make sure that our writing gets to that point. The first tip is that we want to just make sure we can identify anytime we need to check for parallel phrasing. If we have a list, a series of items, if we have 2 or more things in a sentence, they do need to match in some way. Nouns and phrases need to match exactly, and verbs need to match exactly in terms of their tense. So when you have a series of verbs, the verb tense has to match as well. So we can often identify when we have a list with words like either or and. Here, this is an easy one because we have something that indicates there are 2 things in this list. And then we have 2 phrases beginning with that some one of the federal questions did arise, and secondly, that a decision was actually made. So we have 2 restrictive clauses beginning with that, and then a subject and a verb, so they match exactly. When we have 2 items in a list and we have 2 verbs, we need to make sure the verb tenses match exactly. Here we have deliberately seeks, and 2, we have creates. It's okay that we have an adverb in front of seeks. That doesn't mess up the parallelism. The key here is that we have 2 present tense verbs, seeks and creates. And it's hard to identify what we're supposed to be matching up with a longer list like this, but you can see that the first word or second word in the list is the verb, and so we want to make sure that those match. Parallelism can add some elegance to our writing. It can make our sentences sound better. And in fact, a lot of times when we have a sentence that just doesn't sound quite right, especially if it's a longer sentence with a list of things, it's because those items in the list are not listed in parallel construction. And the more we have matching up in a sentence, the more it can flow and the more persuasive punch it can sometimes pack. Here you can read that the states forfeited those arguments because they did not directly argue them, did not present them, did not raise them. So just repeating that element adds some level of persuasion. So here's an example from a Supreme Court opinion, and I've messed with it to create an error, but we have a sentence set off with a colon and then 2 items. The first is the collapse of its oyster fisheries, and the second is harming of its river ecosystem. It just sounds a little off. It would be better to have 2 nouns exactly talking about the collapse of its oyster fisheries and harm to its river ecosystem. And this correct sentence is from Justice Barrett in the Florida v. Georgia case. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes when we have a sentence that just doesn't sound quite right, it's because it's not in parallel structure. And here, let's just take a break from Supreme Court opinions and talk about stranger things. Here's the sentence has a list of reasons why Will Byers is suing the Demogorgon, and that's for taunting him about losing at Dungeons and Dragons, insulted him, and it made him do gardening in the upside down. So we can see we have a verb phrase taunting him, and then we have a past tense verb insulted him, and then we have a complete main clause with a subject, it, and then a verb made him do gardening. So this is not parallel, and there are a number of ways to fix the parallelism problem here. Anything that would just match up these verbs could do that. You can have present tense verbs, you can have all ing verbs, you can make 3 phrases that have subjects and verbs with tenses that match. This example shows you how we can match those up with verbs, all past tense verbs. That the Demogorgon taunted him, insulted him, and required him. And you can see that that just sounds better to your ear even, and it's, of course, grammatically correct. Here is an example from Justice Kagan showing that parallelism is especially persuasive the more we repeat the same idea or the same words, the more persuasive power a sentence or a paragraph can have. And this is from Justice Kagan dissenting in a Voting Rights Act case in 2021. And she begins by writing, because it was and remains so necessary, because a century after the Civil War was fought, at the time of the Act's passage, the promise of political equality remained a distant dream for African American citizens. She continues on to end with, because Congress has been proved right. So these phrases, because, she's giving multiple reasons to show why the majority was wrong. And she even begins with a sentence fragment, but that doesn't even matter. She's showing that she has this, persuasive power by repeating her reasons in this format. We've seen parallelism in all kinds of writing, and it adds some structure and it adds some elegance. This is an example from the Gettysburg Address. And you can see I've just highlighted some of the parts that repeat that same grammatical form. We cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow. What we say here, what they did here, is not just that the subjects and verbs match up and the verbs are all the same tense. It's that the sound of the words actually match, and that really makes this flow in an extra beautiful way. So I just want to end by saying that everyone can be a great legal writer. You are taking the right steps toward that path by just watching these videos, and I hope to see you next time.